Let's get out of here. Let's go look at it. Ha! All right. What a job. All that darn work, guys. Look how they did the freaking tower. All that work paid off. Oh, thank it, heaven. Sure, the boat may be kind of overwhelming, but you know, when you get to a milestone like this, it makes it all worth it. And there's milestones to a build you reach. When you frame it, you feel like you accomplished something. When you start to put sheet metal on it, you feel like you accomplished something. And then when you finally get the flooring and the decking and the paint job, then you really feel like you're almost there on the home stretch. But it was a complicated, tedious process to get it to a point where it could even be wrapped and turfed. So I want to show you that process here in this video right now. Alright, so a brief rundown for new viewers to this channel and people who simply just haven't seen this project yet. So we took on a pontoon boat. It kind of turned into this whole project. Anyways, the siding. I tried 16 gauge sheet metal on the side. It ended up kind of being a massive fail. I tried to attach it with rivets and it wrinkled. Then I tried to weld it, did it worse. I ended up having to rip that piece off because it looked so bad, and ended up having to go with an 1/8 inch wall, which it was pretty heavy. So it added a lot of weight to the boats, but it was the only way to get it nice and straight and then weld on the inside without it bloating on the outside and warping the whole sheet. So I never actually had to do this. This is about as close as I've ever got to having to build an actual hull of a boat. And there was a lot of challenges. For one, you know, there was defects where you seamed it together. I don't know how to TIG, so I had to do the really tedious thing of putting it on there and seaming it all together with a MIG welder. Outside in the wind was terrible. That's why I'm underneath that sheet. It was a miserable process. And a lot of the welds look crappy because the wind would even still grab it underneath the sheet. So you can't really get a clean looking weld if the wind just distorts the gas in any sort of sense. Best case scenario, the weld just turns out ugly. Worst case scenario, enough wind takes away the gas and then your wire corrodes and burns through the hole. So there was a lot of that, and so the seaming, you had to grind it down and orbital sand it. Because there was so much of it, and because it was so tedious to build this outside, I kind of got impatient and grinded on it a lot. And then there were spots you can't see right here in the bare metal, but when you go to primer this, the stuff that you can't see with it just being bare metal, it'll all show exponentially in the primer. And then you can kind of really get to where the defects are and you can kind of smooth it out. Any defect at all is going to show tenfold in the wrap. So the major secret behind painting aluminum and it lasting is etching the aluminum surface. So we took a orbital sander with various like grit. It went from 220 and then eventually all the way down to 40 grit, which is really rough. So that exterior surface is pretty rough even to the touch. Now it's very, very hard for any kind of paint, especially epoxy primer, to like settle into that grit, into that etch, and ever want to come out or separate. And a lot of people just only do this and then they use soap and water, let it air dry, and then they go ahead and they roll the primer on. But me, I want a superior cleaning of the hull, not just it roughed up. So you can do this with like a 50-50 water vinegar mix. The stronger the mix, the better the etch. But then we have actual etch wash, which is acid from Total Boat, that will just, you can just watch all the corrosion and stuff kind of just drip off as it touches the aluminum. But the thing is that it's kind of touchy. You can't let it dry at all. So once you put it on there, you got like 20-30 seconds, maybe less, in the bare sun, how we are. And so my son is already on it, spraying it down, making sure that it doesn't dry and stick there, because if it does that, then it will mess up the whole process. And it also is very fumous and you should not breathe it in. Don't let it touch your skin. Go take a shower if you do, like immediately. And once you spray down the whole side and you don't see any white film running down, you know, make sure that, you know, it gets out of all that etch, because remember we dug pretty deep in there with the etch of the orbital sander. Once you see just nothing but clear water running down the sides, go ahead and let it air dry completely. And then you are ready to roll on the epoxy primer. Now just bear in mind that aluminum starts to re-corrode after the acid wash in as little as 15 minutes. I mean, it just starts to do it. Doesn't mean that it's gonna just completely go back to what it was. But just something to keep in mind, that you need to be kind of fast and do these processes one after another as quickly as possible, but also with care. All right, so there are so many ways you can paint a boat. You have to start by primering it, because aluminum doesn't like to just have bare paint on it. It'll flake off. You can acid etch primer it with spray primer. It has to be acid etching. And this, if I'm doing this I'm not expecting a lot out of the paint. I mean, it will work, but it's not very robust and I wouldn't expect it to last. So in order for this to last, because we're going to be putting a very expensive wrap over it, we're going to be using epoxy primer. Epoxy primer is the best stuff on the market for a lot of things, especially aluminum. So this is stuff's called Total Boat Aluminum Barrier Coat. That is the curing agent, and this is the actual base epoxy primer. You mix it in a 3-to-1 ratio. And then because it's so thick, you want to thin it. So you would need to get, that's not it, epoxy primer thinner. And you're going to use a pretty good copious amount of it. You want it the consistency of like milk, like skim milk, right? Not water, but kind of like milk, between water and milk. You want it pretty thin when you go to roll it on. And know that you have to kind of use like a whisk, like one of these. You have to sit there and pour that in your mixing bucket or your paint tray. And you gotta sit there and pour the thinner in and mix it for a very, 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 very long time until you can tell that it's evenly mixed. And then you got only so much time before it evaporates and the paint gets thick again. Like it won't dry out, but it'll get thick again and you can tell. So I didn't know that. And I did this out in the sunlight, and it was very stupid to do that, but I had no choice because I don't have a garage. We're both this big. Hey guys, quick shout out to our web store, tvnation.net. This is where I got all the parts to build this boat. And everything that I was kind of missing from that store, I got from our Amazon store, including the epoxy primer. And if you want the paint, like Total Boat Wet Edge, really good stuff. You can find it right there. Also, feel free to come and stop by. Check out our entire channel here. There's tons of videos. We've been around here for a while. And we have a set of really strong tutorial videos and just exclusive videos never released to the YouTube public, all for channel members who come and subscribe to us and support us. All right, let's get on to the next step. Epoxy primer is the best primer to use on bare aluminum if you're gonna try and paint it. It lasts forever. After like 5 to 10 days, it hardens like a rock. It's extremely robust. Essentially, it's better than everything out on the market. So if you do the work to prep it so it can actually stick to the hull, then it's totally worth it to use. But as we're rolling it, there is a problem. Even with thinner, it's really hard to get it to not orange peel. The paint has to be really thin. Most people spray this primer on so they can avoid this process. But since I had to roll it on, a really good friend of mine in the crew, Jeremy, whose specialty is painting and prepping hulls, he told me to let this stuff cure for 10 days. And after 10 days, it cures pretty much like a rock. And then you can go ahead and do sanding without having to worry about the primer being too fragile and getting through it. So really the only option I had was to sand it no matter what, whether I was going to paint this or wrap this. The hull has to be smooth and free of defects, or it's just going to show right through the paint and especially right through the wrap. So the primer did its job of exposing the defects, and there were a lot, like so many. A lot of them were horrifying. Some of them I knew about that you could see, and then some of them just came out very apparent once you started kind of prepping and sanding the hull. And even after the initial paint, I saw them, and I was wondering what it was that I was going to do. So one of the only things that I can do is put epoxy on epoxy. So I could possibly just do multiple thin coats of thickened epoxy and kind of trowel it, tape it with a taping knife, kind of bust out my drywall skills here. I'm trying to kind of leave it on there evenly but fairly thick because I'm going to sand it down to the spots, and then any low spots will be filled by the primer, and then everything else should kind of even out so it'll be straight again. A way to completely avoid this would have just been to be way more patient with that grinder, only grind it down so much and then orbital sand the rest of it. That way there were no low spots. And I could have done that. It would have just taken a lot longer and I was sick of it. But you know what's even worse than putting up with that process? Putting up with this process. I would have much rather just sat there for a long time and just, I don't know, listen to music or something and just orbital sanded those grooves away until they were perfectly smooth. And we could have got a really, really good finished product here. And next time I will do that because this sucks. And it's more time. Any time I thought I saved by just kind of grinding it down real fast and then orbital sanding the little bit that was left, I now have to pay in tenfold with this process, which is kind of eating up my time. It's kind of embarrassing, and I almost didn't even want to show you this part. I wanted to kind of flow through the project like, look how good I did, but really if there's something to be learned from it, a lot of what this channel is those situations, and this is how I learned to struggle bus my way to making a hull like this. But on the flip side, the epoxy trick did work. Like, long story short, and it worked actually much better than I thought. In fact, I used this in a whole lot of other areas and situations, not just on the side of the hull. Like, it was a really good tool and just a trick to have on hand when something didn't go quite your way. like in the fabrication process, and you needed to smooth it out so the end product looks good. When people always ask me what I am and what it is that I actually do, and they see me around, I'm just like, I'm a professional bastard. I don't actually have a real profession. Not a boat builder, not a welder, not a fabricator, not an engineer, definitely not a structural aircraft mechanic. I just make things like this and share them with people. Hey guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Please leave a like and a comment and a share, and if you want, subscribe. But you'll help us reach other people just like you if you do those things for us here now. Anyways, let's get on to the actual design portion, because this is the most important. Why we went through that entire mess. So I ended up designing my own. I did this because last time I tried to collaborate with an artist from a wrap design company, they were just like, I don't know, it was really hard for them to see what I would see in my head. So if you had the ability to just kind of give them a rough template, which is what I did here, I gave them this and then they polished it up and made it happen in reality. It looks actually much better when you see it up here. You can see some of the defects where I tried to smooth those things out. You can still see some, but ultimately the side of the hull is pretty darn flat. And it actually looks pretty phenomenal. It definitely does expose every little flaw that I didn't catch, because there are some that even the wrap caught that the primer didn't. But overall, the spots where I was extremely worried about that would look terrible no matter how far close away you were from the craft ended up kind of just smoothing out and being okay. The biggest problem part was the front, and I didn't see it. I thought that was actually fairly straight, so I'm kind of pissed off about that. That'll be there forever. But I don't know, whatever. It still looks so good. I think I can get over the front. What do you guys think? Think that Gator Wraps here did a phenomenal job. I'm really happy to have brought them here. They were who I collaborated with locally here in Lake Havasu. I would recommend them. There are also other great wrap companies. I've only just worked with Gator Wraps, and I thought they were pretty great. They put up with a lot of my stuff. I am an artist at the end of the day, and artists are hard to work with. That's just how it is, and they work with me pretty well. This is such an important part of it because these light boxes up here, without the wrap on, I couldn't really install the lights. At least I didn't think I could. And so I had to wait a lot of things, including the turf. I need to finish the turf job. So you see that hex pattern, that is HydroTurf's new Pro Sheets. I'm gonna go ahead and give you a brief, just glimpse at what they are here. I will give you a full video following this one on how I did this entire boat and turfed it, and why the odd color scheme. Well, I'll have to explain that to you a little bit later here, but I'll just give you a brief preview. The hex, the Pro Sheets with the hex pattern, they are phenomenal. I really think they are something different. You can just seam those pieces together forever. You'll never see the seam. Especially if you paint the back exterior black, you'll never ever even know that this wasn't just like 2 or 3 pieces seamed together. These walls are extra long. They're in excess of 10 feet, each of these walls. There's just some tips and tricks so you don't destroy these sheets, and they are really expensive. So it deserves its own full video, and we'll be bringing that to you next. But there's some things that need to be done to it. For one, that top up there is an Amazon top, and I thought it would work, and it kind of does, but not really. So what we're gonna have to do is get one custom made. So we're going down here to Seam Dreams in Lake Havasu. They're the best in the business for biminis on any boat. They'll just do straight up custom ones. And at this point, they're just gonna make me a custom top to fit this. So for one, it'll actually fit to this custom top, and it'll pull tight. There will be anchors so it won't flap up like you've been seeing it doing in this video. So I can't wait for that. And then we're also collaborating with Fallon Marine here, local in Lake Havasu. They are the top outboard company, like maybe in the region, not just the city. So there's personally no one else that I'd rather have help me through this process. And it is a process that I didn't even think, like, it's one thing to put a rotary steering and a standard outboard, then there's the hydraulic steering, and then there's the DTS and the power steering, and all that stuff is way more complicated. I had no idea, not only in sheer cost, but just steps to complete. There's a whole big deal and a big reason why these are only installed at the OEM level. Anyways guys, this deserves its own dedicated video, but we'll definitely bring that video after the motor is in the water running and the boat's performing. We'll talk to you all about the outboard process. Everything is coming up. This boat is on its final stretch. We are over the hump and on our way to victory. Stay tuned for the finished product.